Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Fearon. Some practices entail pursuing a musical instrument and seeing where it takes you in life indefinitely. This is Andy Forster in his trumpet. I kidded with him in this conversation that from the moment he chose the trumpet chose him. And everywhere he's gone in the last nearly 40 years with his trumpet, as a virtuoso performer, but also an extraordinarily gifted educator, that trumpet has served him well, and he has made the trumpet sound like it's being played by the angels. So I'm building him up a bit here, but I really admire everything Andy means to education in Maine, and particularly to now, since it's been 34 years in one high school, to thousands of rural Maine youth whose first instrument may or may not have led them all the way up to today, but some have, and all of them learned to believe in themselves and in teamwork and in the music, despite any of the obstacles they had to overcome, even to get to school in that rough country. So here is a really fine friend, Andy Forster. Well, have any of my listeners ever heard of music? Yes, everyone has heard music, heard of music. But this conversation with Andy Forster, who is a music educator in Maine, central Maine, and an old family friend, is why we're likely to hear music 5 and 10 years from now coming out of the what school district, Andy?
Messalonsky.
See, I knew my short-term memory is going to fail me. The Messalonsky School District, which, from my recollections, having lived in Western Maine, and that's where I knew Andy and his family, was a way out there, so that when you're hearing music that comes from the music education program at Messalonsky High School, you'll be hearing rare sound indeed. But Andy, let me start by asking you, in the how many years, 30 some years that you've developed that program at that location, have you had some of your kids go on to practice music professionally?
Yeah, so this fall I'm starting year 34 in the school district, and I've had a number of students over the years go out and become teachers. Several of them become teachers, and some of them remain close in the music industry, and some of them have followed the technological path. I've got a student out in LA right now who is one of the top mixing professional mixers for film, and does a lot of shows for Netflix and everything. So wow. He was a great musician that we had, and he was always interested in the technology side, which I also teach.
Yeah. And it was evolving all the 34 years that you were there, I think way back to then. What was the internet? What was what was a mixer? it was a drink. But I the word mixing going on back then, but certainly not one that you could send the results through the web and have it be received by someone else doing the next step. Do it all electronically. And folks, I want you to think about small town, wherever you are, a bit off the main road, and think of what these kids come from little towns, Rome and China, for example, which are main towns. And what are some of the other towns?
Belgrade. So we got the Belgrade area,
which is
and Sydney.
Sydney. There you go. Now, Belgrade has a lot of people from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and then there's hardly anyone living there except the people who do live there year round, and they send kids to your school. So I think the fact that someone has reached the point that your former student has in LA is great testimony to, I think, the very close and careful and even loving teaching that you're known for, Andy, and others in your school, but particularly the attention you've been able to give over the years. And isn't that one of the best results of a teacher, that maybe you're going to be in a brass ensemble in a month or two, and in comes one of your former brass players, says, "I'm joining. Is that okay?" You know, and yeah, that's cool.
It is kind of cool. It's all the connections. It's hard being in the job for this long. It's hard not to have a connection with people I meet. We just finished the Acadia Wind Ensemble performance this last weekend, and that's a group of this year was about 85 music educators from mostly Maine, but there were some folks from different states also. But it's something we do once a year, and I just as I was welcoming people, I'm standing on the podium looking around, and I often ask questions, how many of you, this is your first time being with us, and how many of you have been here all 12 seasons? And I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, that person's student taught with me, that person's student taught with me, that person was a student of mine, and here's 3 members of the group that were in Mid-Maine Youth Orchestra with me. And it is kind of wild. It's crazy, but you're the band director at Skowhegan was a student when I first started, and she's family. We're all family, and music connects us in ways that pretty much nothing else can. It really is. It's spectacular. There's a couple of people in this ensemble who are residents of Florida, but like a lot of people in Florida, they come to Maine for the hot season
to cool off. Yeah.
And they're both remarkable musicians. They're outstanding. And they say, we play all over the place. We play in Naples and we play all over Florida. When we're in Maine, we're playing down in New York and everything. But they said, this group is the high point of our year because it feels like family. And, that kind of says it all.
When people arrived for that event, with all those different backgrounds and skills, how do you get to coalesce so well? It seems to me that particularly the highly active and professional musicians like you are with your trumpet can join into a particular event. The charts help, if you can read to see what they're going to play, and you very likely already know the music, but then without too much rehearsing, boom. I mean, it just sounds like you've been playing together forever. What's the magic in that, or the super sauce that gets musicians to be able to come together that well, that fast?
Well, that's a little bit hard to quantify, but
it's magic.
That's very unique. And I think it's just a testament to how much we understand that we can have our individuality, but we know that when we're part of an ensemble, we have to contribute in ways that means that you have to be listening totally across the group. You have to take your interpretation and make sure it melds with the person nearby, the person across the section. And we all have to watch the conductor. We have to agree on tempos. We have to agree that, who's got the primary material in the section that we're playing, who's got the supportive material, and a lot of that's listening skills that's developed over time. But it really is remarkable when you can sit down and on the first moment that, all of these individuals coming together, and it's just an amazing experience when all of a sudden we sound as one. And a bunch of us were talking, we're looking across the stage, and I think this year was maybe the most diverse group of musicians that we've ever had. And it's just wild. I made a posting on our site thanking everyone the other day. It took me a while to kind of formulate it because, we finished. And I'm just I can't sleep after we had this event. I'm just, my brain has just gone on fire. And I'm like, well, how do I put into words what I'm feeling? And it took me a day and a half to kind of do it. But I kind of said, it's the maybe the only place in life on this stage performing the way we did. It's the only place in life where 2 + 2 equals greater than 4.
Yeah, exactly.
When we come together and I said to them, I said, look, music doesn't care about your politics. Music doesn't care about religion, doesn't care about your sexual preference, doesn't care about your economic status, doesn't care about your ethnicity. And that list can go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
When we come together, we are collective as one, and our purpose is far beyond any of those other things that are barriers in normal life. But when we're together on stage, the barriers are gone because we're all there for one purpose. And that makes music such a powerful and amazing place to be. I said that, the emotions that we go through, music takes you through everything from ecstasy to deep, dark, and profound sadness.
Yeah. But
you travel that journey with everyone. And it's really, it's a life-changing thing. Every time we do this, it's like, oh my goodness, we got all this work to do. We got this, we got to get hotels, we need caterers, we got to get airfare for our guest conductor and all this. And like, oh man, there's so much work. And then let's
not do it this year. You can't imagine saying, let's not do it this year.
Yeah. And then we get there and everybody's like, this is like the most amazing experience. And it is. It took me a day and a half to try to put words to it.
Where did you do it this year?
We had been scheduled for my school, and unfortunately, we had some major maintenance work being done, and the biggest project was 3.5 weeks behind schedule, and it was
Now there you go. So just to have that moment that you created, there's all these things that could get in the way.
Yeah. So a week and a half before the event, we had to move venues.
Wow.
So fortunately, my buddy who teaches over at Lawrence and Fairfield, he agreed, and that was really the only stage big enough to hold us in this central Maine region. We would have had to significantly change distance, which means changing caterers, changing hotels, all of that stuff. So we were very fortunate that they came through for us on that. But I'm still on a high from that weekend. So.
Well, you should be, and it reinforces the idea that you musicians locally or worldwide are a community. And you make a lot of connections because that's what it takes to be able to sit in front of an audience and perform. And I know you're active as a leader among the music educators in Maine, but having a buddy who has a stage with a week and a half with all these people converging is part of the benefit of all the work you put into everything, Andy, isn't it? Having those connections and people you can call on in a pinch. And get that kind of result.
Absolutely. We're a very close-knit community. As you know, the state of Maine, it's geographically a very large state.
Oh, yeah.
Population-wise, comparable to much, much, much smaller regions. And it's just it's really it's challenging, all the isolated places in Maine where, it might be difficult to teach music. It might be difficult as a teacher to be so isolated, but yet we can all come together. And I think that also makes it a special event, because a lot of these teachers don't have a performing outlet for themselves other than maybe their local churches, or some local groups that they might play in, community groups. But certainly not an 85-piece ensemble that's playing really, really high level literature.
Wow. That's amazing. I'll take the microscope and point it a different way now. I think before we started the recording, we talked a little bit about you following your trumpet more than 34 years, all the way back through college and all the way back through high school, where you and my son and sometimes my daughter played in several bands. The trumpet and Andy seem to be, if you were thinking of either one, you have to put the other together. And I ask you, because you were in a very small rural area, Farmington, Maine, how did you and the trumpet first meet? So tell that story again, because it's really cool.
So my brother and sister are both older than me. My brother 8 years older and my sister 6 years. So they were doing high school things when I was in elementary school. So I just remember seeing my brother and his friends and in the high school marching band and jazz, playing jazz and playing the marching stuff. And one of my brother's best friends was a trumpet player, and one of my sister's best friends was also a trumpet player. And I just remember going to see the marching band. And the thing that I remember is my brother's friend walked out in front of the group because he had a little short solo, but he was by himself in front of the group with a really cool looking uniform and he's playing a solo. I'm like, oh man, I would love to do that. So it just happened to be trumpet. So then of course it was time for me to pick up an instrument. And, before I did the school band stuff, I was, taking piano lessons when I was young.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a kind of a little kid drum set that I was playing when I was like 5. So my brother was playing electric guitar, my sister's playing piano, and I'm this little kid who's much younger than there, and I'm jamming out in the drum set. So I kind of thought that that might be my calling in life, but I kind of liked the trumpet. And then my mom's best friend had a trumpet in the attic someplace and said, hey, this isn't being used. If you're looking for an instrument, of course, money's tight. So
the price is right for that one. Yeah.
So, hey, you can use this. And so my first attempt at a sound was no sound. So like most kids, I'm like, how do I do this?
So like,
I had no idea what I was doing. So
did you get instruction in the trumpet though, once you had it?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah.
Was that through the elementary school instructional program that that Daryl used to teach in at some point?
Yeah. Yep. Grade 5 beginning band. So
yeah. So someone told you how to make a bit more sound, but I'm sure you had some natural talent. You have to, because I've heard you play all through those years. And that's not just the mechanics. That's someone who has such synergy with the instrument and with the trumpet part in the various songs that it's like natural. This is what talent sounds like when it has plenty of room to play.
Well, I always tell my students, I said, I've been playing trumpet for like 2,000 years or something like that.
They think you're that old. Got a little white in your beard now. And tell us like it was. Did they have automobiles back then? Mr. Forrester?
We didn't use pens. They gave us a chisel and hammer. But I always tell them, I say, look, I've been playing all my life and I haven't learned a fraction what there is to learn. So, it's a process that's ongoing. I know that today I'm a better trumpet player than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
a better trumpet player than I was 10 years ago. Now, that doesn't mean I have maybe the same level of endurance or the same level of confidence that I may have had at a younger age, but
the wind.
for the wind. But I still, my musical maturity gets me through. I'm wiser about how I practice. I'm wiser about maybe how I take care of myself when I'm trying to stay in shape for the physical side of playing the instrument. That's a challenge.
Definitely. And like you did at the Educator ensemble program, there's a lot of one song after another, and you want to sound as good or better on the last piece than you did on the first.
That's an endurance test for sure.
It is. You guys are incredible to watch in that regard. And I want to restate the key point you made, because I've heard this in a number of the episodes that I've recorded with people. People I think are basically top of game, and right away they correct me on that. No, I'm not. I'm still learning, and not only that, but as I'm learning, conditions change, situation change, technology changes. So even if I was totally satisfied that I was at the best at whatever it may be, golf, you name, something has changed in the game, or even in me, and I'm not satisfied. But it's a wonderful itch to scratch, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the great cellist Pablo Casals played into it, I think, into his 90s, and somebody asked him at his elder years, you've been why do you still practice? You say you practice every day, and he said, at least he's attributed this. He said, "Well, I feel like I'm making progress."
the best ever. Yeah. No, this is one of the reasons that Peter Vail started this quest about over 10 years ago now, is all the years that he and I taught managerial leadership, which, by the way, is an incredibly complex thing to be a managerial leader, whether you're in a small town or trying to govern a country. It's still incredibly complex. So we felt honor bound as sort of purveyors of theory to find the best theory we could of the moment, and then help people bridge to theory, and then tell them, don't go forward into a role that's where you're responsible for the well-being of others if you're not really ready to make a continuous study of it. We're just giving you a sampler, similar to when you start people out in your music program. And what got into Peter's craw, stuck in his craw, as we say there in Maine, was that we really don't understand where someone is going in their life once they finish their time with us. And so we've got to emphasize this. We're helping you become a superb learner. And the content will somewhat take care of itself as long as you take care of the content. But that emphasis on being a self-directed, avid, hungry, and restless learner is what we were hoping to cultivate in our teaching. And boy, I'll tell you, he did with me, because I'm still into this work, and when I'm 80. But and that's what I hear in you, Andy. And as you getting together with young now music educators just coming into their careers there in Maine, and maybe their first high school or their first whatever, they've come fresh out of school. Do you think that some of them think, well, I spent 4 or so years studying this, I'm fine now, the rest is gravy? Or do you at least urge them as the sort of the senior guy now in the field to say, keep learning, keep paying attention to all the cool stuff that's going to be happening, because you'll never be bored?
Oh, absolutely. And I apologize for all the ravens are kind of going nuts outside, so you're probably hearing some.
No, I think what they were saying to each other, I'll have to edit out because it's a little off color. You know those ravens.
Oh yeah. So it's interesting. We're at kind of a crossroads in education right now. There's as you're, I'm sure, well aware, there's a national shortage of teachers. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of teachers leaving the profession. Retaining teachers is very difficult. As you know, it's no surprise that teacher pay is not what it should be, and you got young people starting out in a career, and young people want things, and sometimes the the wins and losses of teaching is sometimes not enough. So it's challenging, especially in the first 5 years of somebody becoming.
Yeah, those are crucial years.
I'll make it specific to a music teacher. COVID, we can blame a lot of things on COVID, but I think educationally, COVID destroyed a lot of things in education. It just
it did.
I have so many colleagues who, 3 years ago, they're like, I am close enough, I'm out. And, I can't blame them. I don't blame them at all. I don't hold any ill will for people who took the path, the exit ramp. That's totally fine. But I'm also seeing young teachers do that too. And that concerns me. And
very troubling.
I think some of it is that there is so much that you don't learn in college because you can't learn in the classroom what you need to learn in the classroom. So
that's right.
Let me rephrase that.
That's right.
There's so much that you can't learn sitting in a class. And it's something that you have to learn being the teacher.
That's right.
And those first few years of teaching, it's enormously hard. I just remember my first, even student teaching, I would come home at the end of the day, student teaching, and I'd fall asleep because I was just exhausted. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then
this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Yeah. I don't know.
And then you become a first year teacher and you realize, oh my goodness, I thought I knew everything and I feel like I know nothing, but that's okay. What people have to realize is, you cannot learn all of it in college. You can't learn even a fraction of what you need to know. And, if I made a list of what you need to know, compared to what you learned in college, you're talking like chapter 1 in a 50-volume series. And it's just, you have to go into it knowing that, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to do my best. And my goal is to be better next month than I was last month. And my goal is to be better next year than I was last year. And your goal is to make connections with kids. And it's the connections that we want, whether or not any of my students continue in music, that's gravy, but that's not my purpose. My purpose is to not make the next professional player for the Boston Symphony. My purpose is to have a profound impact on a student, and such that they leave my program being a great person.
I love that. And
happens to be a great musician, Yeah,
and that's good too. But they also learn how to cooperate, collaborate, have that sense that you talked about, where you have to look at across the whole ensemble you're part of, and get a sense of where they are, so you can learn to harmonize and literally, physically, socially harmonize as well as with their instrument. And kids who aren't going to be the jock and get out there and learn teamwork have music as a chance to learn a lot of things about their social experience and the prospects they're going to have, particularly seeing someone like you who knows so many people and is so well known, so they can see that having connections, having people who understand who they are and have even if they're only 16 or 17, they're developing a reputation, a good one, so that someone later on can say, can you think of anyone who could do X, Y, and Z, that they might get mentioned, and then that opens up another opportunity. Believe me, all those years that I worked in the University of Maine at Farmington, around those very sparsely populated towns, I always was concerned, and I overcame that gradually, that the people living there were quite insular and not very interested in expanding their awareness in their mind. And I was promoting a continuing education at the university. I learned better when I finally got out there and would sit at meetings or sit down sometimes at the invitation of someone in some of those little towns, that they were very, very interested in what was going on. They just had no clear idea how to get from there to, to our campus and our classrooms, and whether they'd even be welcome. I can tell you how many times that I kind of rigged someone's high school, saying, well, let her in anyway. She's in her 30s. No, she didn't finish high school, but she really is motivated to take this course. Well, let her audit it if necessary, but get her on campus, whoever she might have been. And then I would follow up, of course. And next thing you know, they would say, oh, she's a great student. How can we get her come back? What do we have to do to get her qualified? And I love that, because that's the challenge you've had all those years with those so-called small towners, is to help them open their horizon. And certainly music does that.
Absolutely. And along with that, part of that development, both as students and even as young teachers, you have to develop a mindset in which you're okay with failing.
Yeah.
And I tell my students right from the very beginning, the first day we had beginners, I write it in big letters across the board. I said, you cannot be afraid to fail, because if failing something paralyzes you, then you're never going to be a musician, because you're not going to get it right the first time. You're not going to get it right maybe the first 10 or 20 or 30 times.
Yeah.
But when you do get it right, it's going to be so rewarding that you're going to.
It's a great thrill.
Yeah, and people, that's a hard sell for kids these days, because they want gratification.
Instant. They've been so conditioned by their phones and everything to
music is kind of a delayed gratification, but it's so much more powerful. If you put in the time, you're rewarded 10 times over.
Well, speaking of time, I've loved this conversation, Andy, and I have to turn off the recording and thank you in other ways. Talk a little bit of family before we hang up. But this is Andy Forster, who was born and raised in Farmington, Maine, and became good friends with our family when we moved there, when the kids were in early elementary school. And I have unceasingly admired Andy and his wonderful family. I could do a whole other podcast with Andy on being a ski patroller. And how many years, Andy, now?
Just finished my 40th year.
40 years. Ski patrolling in our little mountain called Titcomb and beyond. But he and his dad in particular were amazingly responsible to keep us safe on those slopes. And somewhat the same kind of commitment to constant learning as a ski patroller as he does as a music educator. So thank you, Andy.
It's been my pleasure to talk with you. I'm honored to be asked.
Thanks for listening to the Practice Podcast, where we discuss practice with a capital P. If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to enactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to enactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Oh, and one more thing. How could I forget? The book on practice as a way of being is available now in digital form, something that would be new, like podcasting to many of us. And it's a great way of learning more and more about what this podcast presented when Peter Vale and I originated it several years ago. So please come to www.mylibrary.world/practice, and you'll see what I mean. Thank you.